Lately, I have been noticing something interesting among parents, especially in urban India. Many of us are becoming increasingly anxious about the language English. There seems to be this race that starts almost from birth. Parents are speaking English to babies, buying English flashcards, English toys, English books, and somewhere underneath all of that is a fear that if a child doesn't start English early enough, they will somehow fall behind. And I understand that fear because I think I also grew up with it. A little context. So when I was a child, English wasn't seen just as a language. It was seen as a marker of intelligence. It was seen as a marker of education, sometimes even that of social status. So people made assumptions about you based on how fluent your language English was. I remember growing up with this kind of narrative around me that children whose parents didn't know English well would probably never become very good at it themselves because you had to converse in English all the time. So it's a strange belief looking back, honestly, because the person who laid the strongest foundation for my English was my mother. My mother has a master's degree in Hindi and has always loved the language Hindi. She cultivated the love for the language Hindi as well for me, but she was the person who taught me how to read and write in English as well. So she was a person who sat with me when I was young and helped me understand how language works. So since she used to get very involved in teaching me how to understand the grammar part of Hindi, and when she would teach me English, she would correlate the two. This happens in this language and this is not how it works in English, and so on and so forth. So I think that is where my confidence in the language came from. Like, I knew if I can do this, I can also do that. And later, obviously, I went ahead to learn different languages as well. That's a story for some other time. Now, this was clubbed with a hands-me-down book or a copy of Wren and Martin. It's a grammar book. Now, those books ended up becoming a huge part of my childhood because I would spend hours solving exercises, making mistakes, correcting them, and then again trying the same, exercises. So I had never planned, of becoming a English literature student. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing, and one can build a career around it. I was just trying to grasp the language. And at that point of time, I was just doing it to score good marks, which I did. I think I remember consistently since 7th grade, I have been getting the highest marks in the language, in the subject English. So fast forward a few years, that foundation kept growing. Now today I have 2 master's degree in English literature. I have spent almost a decade studying the language and its literature. I write professionally, I speak confidently in English. Sometimes I even catch myself thinking in English. And because language has played such a significant role in my life, becoming a parent made me curious about how children actually acquire language in the first place. So I started reading about it. I started looking into child development, language acquisition, and the research around bilingualism and multilingualism. And one thing that kept standing out to me was that many parents are worrying about the wrong thing. Something that I say in almost all my videos. The question isn't whether your child hears English early enough. The question is whether your child is developing a rich relationship with the language itself. Now, those are 2 very different things. A baby's brain spends the first few years of life building connections between sounds and meanings, right? Every conversation or story or nursery rhyme, every interaction is helping them make sense of the world that is so unknown to them and that they're still exploring, right? So when your child hears a word repeatedly, they slowly begin connecting that sound to an idea or an object or an emotion or an experience. Now that process is incredibly powerful. What surprised me was realizing that language development and English development are not the same. So many of us treat them as though they are the same, but it is not the case. We assume that if we maximize English exposure, we are automatically maximizing language development. And this was also a belief back when I was growing up. So I was going to a Christian minority school initially, where they would a fine on you for speaking in Hindi. And there used to be sisters around, right? So during the lunch break, whenever we used to be around them, we always used to get fearful of speaking in front of them, because they were the ones who would if they caught you speaking in Hindi, you will be reprimanded for that. But back then, I think there was no understanding that children develop language through meaningful communications or stories or conversations or lived experiences. Songs, songs played a major role in my life, when I was trying to get a hands on this language. So through hearing language spoken naturally and confidently by people around them is equally important. And this is where I think many Indian parents are selling themselves short. A parent who speaks Hindi comfortably and expressively is giving their child something valuable. Now, a parent who tells stories in Tamil or Bengali or Gujarati or Marathi or Maithili, whatever, is giving their child something equally valuable, right? A parent who sings lullabies in Marathi, Bengali, Punjabi, Malayalam, Tulu, Kannada, or any other language is giving their child something valuable. Because what the child is learning first is not English. The child is learning language. The child is learning how communication works. The child is learning how ideas are expressed. So slowly, they learn how stories and structures are formed, and then they will learn how to, describe their emotions. So this is how these skills kind of transfer in the first place. And this is where I think the conversation around English often becomes backwards. Many parents worry that focusing on their mother tongue will hold their child back from the language English. And a decade of learning about the language and its literature has, if anything, has taught me one thing, is that we really need to decolonize our minds, when it comes to the language. It is one of the most damaging thing colonization has done, the empire has done to more than half the world. I don't know what the future will look like, but we as parents need to decolonize our minds first before we pass on the same traditions or the same ideas we grew up with to our kids. Because the research suggests something much more encouraging, especially for Indians, land with so many languages. So children who develop a strong foundation in their first language often find it easier to acquire additional languages later. And I'm saying additional languages because the end goal is never the language English. Okay, so there can be other languages that your child might be interested in learning later on, and they should be able to, like, why not? So the mother tongue is not really competing with English, so parents can really chill about that. It is, if anything, helping the child build foundation on which a language like English can later grow. When I look back at my own life, the idea makes perfect sense to me, because nobody forced English into every corner of my childhood. It was not something which was imposed onto me, which was, yes, there were people around me who would push me to read English newspaper and English magazines and so on and so forth. But after a point, I think I felt more comfortable with English, because I think I was also growing up in that zone where, I thought I had to conquer this language, and I think I eventually did that also. So the good thing is that I was surrounded by people who valued learning and reading and language and education at large. In fact, I had some people who would push me to read in English or in Hindi, my mother tongue. So language skills come from that foundation. I think English comes much later, which is why if I could leave parents with one thought, it would be that instead of asking how can I make my child fluent in English as early as possible, you should ask how can I help my child fall in love with the language. And this could be any language. You could read to them, you could talk to them, you could tell them stories. They've just come to the world. You want to ensure that this world doesn't feel unfamiliar to them. Expose them to as many words as you can. Let them hear you speak confidently in the language that feels most natural to you. Because when a child develops a deep relationship with the language, I think English stops being a mountain they have to climb. It becomes just another language they can learn. I think English was never a problem in my case. What was a problem was maths, because I was always made to be scared of maths, because I was always told that you have to get good grades in maths. And even though in retrospect I realized I wasn't such a bad student, I was average at math, but I always felt below average because I lacked that confidence, owing to the pressure that was built around the subject for me. And if my own journey has taught me anything, it's a strong foundation in any language, which will make a child much further, than an early obsession with English ever can. The older I get, the more I realize that childhood is built from ordinary moments, and this is something that you can only understand in retrospect. When you're growing up, you can't see these things. You can't cherish those moments, but you can only cherish these moments in retrospect. So always remember that a parent who keeps showing up is the best thing you can do for your child. So wherever you are in your parenting journey at this point of time, I hope this video gives you something to think about. I hope it's given you something to question, or maybe even something to try. Thank you for being here, and until next time, remember this: the little things we do for our children today often become one of the biggest things they carry into their adulthood. So with that thought, I'd like to sign off, and see you next time.